Okay, hello. We're back with Deep Images, and we're continuing our Black Cinema series. Back with us from last time, we got Bill Mulligan, we've got Kaylin Ireland, and for the first time on this topic, we have Tim Tolbert, our wonderful executive producer, and Briggy Williams, who was on our last segment, will be rejoining us in a little bit. So a few of the other guys couldn't make it, but it's their loss because we're going to have a great time. So I am going to do something unusual and go first because I did a lot of homework, to quote Charles Pinion. Sorry if you're watching this, Charles.
I didn't know there was homework. I would have never agreed
Yeah,
to do this if that were
I
the
couldn't
case. I'm not
resist it.
prepared.
Just
Is there a
got too many-
quiz?
Damn it.
Having just finished a educational program, I am quite not happy about homework.
I don't like homework either, but
No more homework. Done.
But yeah, I wish I had the brain where I could just like spit out everything about all these movies extemporaneously, but I don't have it. I have more of it than some people, but far less than others. I mean, there's people on this podcast who can do a better job of it than me, so I have to study a bit. So the first one I want to talk about is called Personal Problems. So this was directed by Bill Gunn, and Bill Gunn might be known to some of you guys as the director of Ganja and Hess, which is probably the most idiosyncratic vampire movie ever made, at least in the top 2 or 3, and was not a blaxploitation movie per se, but was marketed that way. Unfortunately, it was also like missing like 20-30 minutes. The scenes were rearranged, it was re-edited. The originals got lost for decades. So well after Bill Gunn and Dwayne Jones, the star, had passed away, they finally reassembled and have the complete version. They have had it since the dawn of DVD. But I reviewed that on one of our Halloween series about vampires. But Bill Gunn, he didn't do a lot of feature films. He did one before Ganja and Hess, and I forgot the name of it. It's something like The Stop or The Score. It has a very simple 1 or 2 word title, but I've not seen it. It's very hard to find. But in 1977, he got together with Ishmael Reed, African-American poet and essayist, novelist, who was a co-founder of like the East Village Other, just a really big countercultural figure. And Ishmael Reed had this idea to do what he called a meta soap opera. And in order to bang it out on a budget, he was going to experiment with filming on video. And so this is 77. So, back then, I think even soap operas shot on film. So this was kind of like, a big deal. But at the same time, unfortunately, it is what they did. But unfortunately, it has hurt the film over time because that video technology became obsolete almost immediately. So in remastering it in the last 10 years, it was quite a task. And for some people, it would be a task to watch it because it's just tons of artifacting. Other people call it ghosting or smearing, but I like the Tim Lucas word artifacting. It sounds cooler. And so like if that drives you crazy, you shouldn't watch it. But on the other hand, I tend to see art case by case. So, I get what they were trying to do. In 1977, they shot a basic script and they had a small amount of characters, who kind of had a soap opera like plot, failing marriages and family drama, etc. And but they were all going to be people who lived in New York City, and they were either like lower middle class to working class people, and all of them black. And it was not going to be like it was not going to be a genre film like Ganja and Hess, and it wasn't going to be heavily political or satirical like a lot of Ishmael Reed's work on his own. It was really kind of groundbreaking. It was kind of more like the kind of independent black dramas that came years later, like Losing Ground and Daughters of the Dust. So this was really this one really broke a lot of ground. It just didn't get seen by a lot of people. They were trying to make it as like a pilot, and if it sold, it would be on PBS. And so you'd get a bunch of episodes, not daily like soap operas, but maybe weekly. And so, you know, you wouldn't really care about the low resolution visuals. And a lot of us didn't know want better one way or another back then. I know I did it in 1977, but I was, you know, very young. But um unfortunately it didn't get picked up in that venue. So they had recorded 90 minutes and they went ahead and recorded another hour and 10 minutes, a little bit of which has some footage intercut at the beginning parts that flash back to the 90-minute one. So it's like part two, you know. So it could have been shown on TV at the time as a mini series, except A, the picture quality was poor, and B, in 1977, there weren't any black miniseries. That was the year Roots literally came out and was the first one. So Bill Gunn was always ahead of his time. It's, you know, a whole generation knows him as an actor who played Bill Cosby, Cliff Huxtable's poker playing buddy on the Cosby Show. I'm sorry, that's the ignoble ending for a guy that brilliant, but you know, whatever. You have to eat, you know. So Gunn and Reed were pretty ambitious with this, and when I say ambitious, you know, like I said, it wasn't the most beautiful looking resolution, but you know, the shots are there. Gunn is still a great visual stylist, a great dramatist, and of course Reed was a great writer. And essentially, it's just mainly about a character named Johnny Mae Brown, and she's played by a woman named Verta Mae Grosvenor. Don't really know much of anything about her before or since, and not many people who have reviewed Personal Problems does either. But everyone tends to agree that she was kind of a brilliant one of a kind in this particular part. So essentially, she's a nurse. She works at Harlem Hospital. And as with the territory, late 70s, Harlem Hospital, there's a lot of criminal people who've been wounded in crimes, drug deals gone wrong. And she kind of describes, you know, what that's like. The show starts with her on camera, and she's interviewed by this unseen person who's kind of mumbling. You can't really make out a lot of what they're saying, but that's true of a lot of interviews you see on DVDs now. But they're just prompting her, and she just kind of goes into what it's like working at the hospital, some of the memorable patients she's had, working under those conditions. And she's really a person who's really full of life. She really likes her job. She doesn't have a lot of money, but she likes helping people. She has a very strong, I guess you could say, maternal instinct. She has a daughter, we're told, but we never see the character. Apparently, they're off at college or something. And but Johnny Mae is she's very charismatic, and the digital camera that Bill Gunn uses really loves her, and she's very expressive. And there are portions of this that are improvised. It has a very Cassavetes kind of feel to it in a lot of it. I'll get more into that later. The ending is very Cassavetes, but basically, you know, Gunn and Reed set up the characters, the situations, and then just filmed. And since they were filming on cheap video, they could just film and film and film. So there's a ton of deleted scenes that are also on the Blu-ray, which I've only watched once. I didn't watch them for this particular presentation. I just kind of ran out of time. And I wanted to kind of just go with the story as they intended it anyway. So she's married to a guy named Charles Brown. I know Charlie Brown jokes. And he's kind of the way he's brought to us is unlikable cat. You know, he's kind of like, he doesn't like to work. He doesn't like to help around the house. He doesn't like to have sex with his wife. He doesn't really like to do anything except complain constantly about nothing. And, you know, it always triggers this poor woman. So a plot develops, and, you know, I'm a big soap opera buff. I'll admit it. I know there aren't many of us in this space. I know Keith Howell, who's not with us tonight, like me, grew up heavily on soap operas, so we know all those tropes. We've talked about them on the show before. This is kind of one of those cases where you get invested in the characters kind of quick, and you're hoping for certain outcomes, and unfortunately, you're disappointed, but not because, I think Ishmael Reed screwed up as a writer or made the wrong narrative choice. It's his story, it's his characters. But because you wish they'd gone down a path that you would envision as being making them happier, because you do like the character. And this is kind of what happens with our main character, because she begins having an affair with a character named Raymond, Raymon, which is a takeoff on the actor's name. His name is Sam Waymon, Waymon, Raymond. Sam Waymon did the music for Ganja and Hess. He also played the character who is not only Hess Green's chauffeur, but he also is a pastor at a church. And, in both of these roles, he plays music, and as in real life, he's also a musician. And back when I got the first Ganja and Hess DVD release in '98, I believe, he was one of the surviving people that did the audio commentary. Since then, he's one of the few people associated with the movie at all that's still alive. Marlene Clark has passed away, and several other crew members. But Sam Wayman's been a huge champion of that movie, and his music in Ganja and Hess is brilliant. His acting is quite good. So in this one, he doesn't score the personal problems like he did Ganja and Hess, but he does write a song that he performs. His character is a musician, and he's just as likable as he was in Ganja and Hess. He's just a cool guy. And Johnny May goes to see him perform one night, just happens to see him playing at this club. She likes to watch blues. And, again, a lot of this improvised. So, they just let Sam Wayman just perform the entire song in real time. No edits, no cuts, no setup concert. It looks like you're right there sitting in the club watching him. And then, they start talking. And we found out from her introductory spiel, where she talks about being a nurse, that one thing she really likes about herself, but that she doesn't put out into the world, is that she's a poet. And she starts like just extemporaneously reciting some of it to the interviewer in the beginning. And it's some brilliant fucking shit. I mean, obviously, Ishmael Reed is considered a brilliant poet himself. But so she recites the same poem to Ramon when they go on kind of a date. And they start going on dates. And he's like totally the opposite of the husband. He touches the part of her that's very humanist, that's very artistic, that's very creative. And I was like so wanting them to end up together at the end, and spoiler, they don't, which kind of broke my heart every time I watched it, really, to be honest, because he's such a cool person and cool character. And so is she. But unexpected things happen in real life, and that's one of the lessons of this movie, is that these are kind of like real people the way they really would live, if they existed. Even the creative types who do this incredible poetry and music, they still have to worry about, where their meals are coming from, how they pay the rent, and having deadbeat husbands, So that affair blossoms, and there's a period where Sam Wayman as Ramon has his little interview thing where he's kind of shot off center, and he's not really asked questions, but he kind of like pours out his soul. And it's kind of sad when you watch the whole thing, because he's really afraid to get involved with this woman. He knows she's married. He knows she's unhappily married, and he's like super sensitive, more than you see him interacting with her. And that I could really relate to that. When you're starting to fall in love with somebody, especially if it's like going to be one of those maybe impossible, kind of situations, and you don't really tell anybody except maybe your very best friends, that kind of stuff. And so his best friend in this case is Bill Gunn's camera. And so, at that point, you're like, God, I want them to get together and stay together. You soon find out that the husband actually is interested in sex, just not with his wife. And so he picks up some woman who, stereotypically, but a lot of stereotypes are rooted in real things. We've all been in relationships. We all know there is such a thing as the crazy ex or the crazy person you have the affair with. And, it's exciting at first, and then they destroy your life or try to. So he gets involved with a woman like that. And it doesn't get to like the fatal attraction level because it is rooted in more realistic storytelling. But she is kind of a flake, and eventually the wife catches them in bed together. Probably the first time the wife's caught her husband in bed having sex in 20 years, you know. And so that, yeah, that's kind of rough. Along the way, uh, they have had these incidences where, you know, they don't have a lot of room in their apartment, and at various times they've had to have relatives come and stay with them. And basically they've, you know, had to, you know, foot the bill for the relatives even when they really couldn't afford it, which basically means that Johnny May, the main character, is supporting it. But the difference between her and her husband is she's willing to do it, even though she's kind of the breadwinner. She's kind of the altruistic, family is family, you know, we're going to do this. And he's kind of like, hell no, this is our domain. I mean, I'm kind of with him there, but you know, um, that's just me. So the father of his father comes to stay with them after one of her relatives has come to stay with them, and it's been a disaster. And the father is kind of, he's irritating. He irritates the hell out of Johnny May, and she kind of regrets her largesse in letting him live there. Um, and you go through several kind of vignettes with this small handful of characters. And one problem that the first part of it really, the longer part is really mainly focusing mainly on her affair with the musician. The second part is zeroing in more on the husband, and I guess, you know, you're trying to do what a good writer would do, and even make the character that you'd probably hate in real life sympathetic on some level within the story. And so you start to see, you know, that the husband's not a total prick. You know, he's maybe 50% a prick. And, you know, his woman that he's having the affair with is in trouble with the law, and they get busted by the police, and they have to go down to the police station, and the wife has to bail him out. And this is even before she catches them having sex. That's just slightly later. And but his father dies, and the Raymond character kind of sort of is pushed to the periphery. Johnny May is like a real individualistic character, but she's also kind of has a sense of duty with family and with her career, which that's why she pushes aside her creative side. And her pushing him aside, albeit not rudely, but he just all pretty much disappears from the movie. And I do think it was purposeful, is that she sees the husband's having trouble, she's going to step up and help. Even though I'm thinking, don't do this, girl. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And she does it. And by the end of the movie, Reed and Gunn have convinced me that while I don't agree with her decision, I get why she did it, because you learn that the husband actually does have a soul, and he does regret being a deadbeat and fucking around on her. And you know, his father dying kind of breaks him. And so that when the woman who he's been having the affair with comes back around again, and this is all played out, he's not talking on a payphone. You only see his point of view. He's like, no, no, I don't want to see. No, no, don't come around. No, 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 it's over. I'm married. You knew I was married. Okay, come on now. And so he shows a little bit of guts there. And he tells this woman, you know, I got to concentrate on my marriage right now. And that's true, he does. And they go for a walk, and she said, don't keep in all these feelings you've always kept in. You know, if you're sad about your father dying and all this pressure, you know, you need to cry. You know, you need to talk. You don't need to be this kind of too strong kind of black man, like holding this burden. And so yeah, he reaches out physically and holds her and wants to be held. And from then on, they go on a few dates. They're holding hands, and they start talking about moving to Chicago. And he's like, why do you want to move to Chicago? She's like, because that's where the blues is and jazz, and I love this stuff. You know, I like to go see blues. Irony on us that that's how she met the boyfriend, of course. But she's kind of, the husband is finally realizing after, oh wow, my wife is really into music. Oh, okay, this is cool. You know, it's like they're getting to know each other all over again. So it's plausible, you know, that they could start over. So that's basically the whole story. It was, like I said, shot on videotape. It was some kind of videotape that wasn't around long. It was a 3/4 inch UMEC. I'm not sure what that is, but I read about it on the DVD Beaver website, and it sounded very interesting. But it was a challenge to remaster it. And finally they did, and they played it at this place called the Metroland. I forgot what city it was in. In 2018, they screened the entire almost 3 hours, and it got great reviews. And Kino Lorber quickly picked it up, put out the Blu-ray, and I didn't know it existed the years I was into Ganja and Hess. And then, I knew that Kino Lorber had changed hands again, and we're putting out a lot of inexpensive Blu-rays of films that I liked. And I noticed that was a movie they were putting out, and that it was by Bill Gunn. I'm like, let me grab it. And it's one of those movies that is a unique experience, and it really broke a lot of ground. But you have to kind of stick with it. It's not going to be for everybody's attention span due to the way it's paced and the way the story's told and the way it's shot. I've seen it all the way through now about 7 times, I think, over a period of a year, and 3 of them this week. And so I just wanted to immerse myself so that I could get over what was keeping me from just yielding to the story and kind of meeting it on its own terms. I liked it, but I just was having trouble just sitting from beginning to end and absorbing it. So now that I've conquered it, so I highly recommend it. And as far as for this kind of movie, like I said, it undoubtedly influenced a lot of stuff that came out in the 80s and 90s by other Black filmmakers, and it's finally kind of getting its due now. And rest in peace, Bill Gunn. So I think Tim's next.
Okay. That was very nice, Henry. Thank you. That I was not familiar with that movie at all.
Me neither. Yeah.
Most people aren't.
Kino Lorber does the Lord's work, as I always say. They put out such great titles. They're even still doing that. I think a lot of the boutique labels aren't really putting. I mean, Vinegar Syndrome is and Severin, but like even Shout Factory, they're just recycling old titles. But Kino's still, pumping out.
Kino's sitting on that MGMUA catalog.
Yeah, which is a fantastic catalog,
mine,
especially for these kind of movies. And actually, one of the movies I get into tangentially related to that, because I think AIP also kind of had some MGM hands at some point in time, because AIP released Abby, which is what I'm going to talk about now.
And Abby has no plans to be on Blu-ray anytime soon.
No, unfortunately, and I'll get into that a little bit. But
I'm going to help Tim with some visual aid. I do have the out-of-print DVD of Abby.
Thank you for show and tell. Okay,
starring the late great Carol Speed. I mean that.
Who put that out?
She was a great, albeit very unusual person, but very great person.
It kind of shows, but
she was a true eccentric.
Yeah,
this was a really small label. It wasn't even. I was going to say it was Xenon, but it wasn't. It was Cinephere.
Yeah. When I watched it, I actually watched it on YouTube, and I'm not sure what the DVD. I'm not sure what the DVD quality is, but I know that there's really no great prints that exist of this movie, at least that are commercially available. So Abby is a blaxploitation movie, more or less. We'll just kind of get that out of the way. It was made by William Girdler, who directed one of my favorite movies, which is Grizzly, which is the killer grizzly bear movie. He also did stuff like The Manitou, things like that. And he directed this movie, and essentially it's, and now I'll talk about the content of the movie itself, but it's often perceived or pitched as being a black ripoff of The Exorcist. It's kind of the way that people always go into it, like, oh, this is the blaxploitation Exorcist movie. It sort of is and it sort of isn't. They do take things from The Exorcist and repurpose them in the movie. I think it's its own thing. It kind of talks about different ideas differently from The Exorcist. Something that I was really taken by with this movie was, despite the fact that it's not really all that well seen anymore, it's kind of innovative in the way that it does a lot of the scares and a lot of the big set pieces. I mean, I'm not saying these kind of movies looked at Abby and took it from that, but a lot of the jump scares and kind of scary moments are things that you see in a lot of demonic possession movies now, The Conjuring, Insidious, stuff like that. There's scenes that literally look like they were ripped right out of those, right out of those movies, and this is 1974.
Do you feel like they were trying to go for the vibe that Blackula had, where it
I,
actually
I
has
think
some scary stuff
yeah,
in it, despite what people think.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I actually think that the way that this film is structured, I wouldn't necessarily say it's scarier than The Exorcist. I wouldn't say that, but I think it's like a crowd pleaser, or almost like a small blockbuster. It really kind of structures its scares very, very nicely, and I think really kind of works. And it is very much a crowd pleasing movie in terms of just how the movie is laid out narratively. It has the amazing William Marshall in it, who, anytime William Marshall's in a movie, that movie automatically goes up a star, because he's just
Right.
he was one of the most incredible actors, and he could sell anything. There's a couple of times in this movie where he gives some kooky line deliveries, like when he's in Nigeria and he's on the phone and he kind of sounds like he's half interested, but he'll just say some goofy lines, and he just pulls them off brilliantly.
Yeah, it
I
sounds like
can't remember
Shakespeare.
yeah, I can't remember exactly, but there was one that kind of made me laugh, because the husband calls and says, like, "Oh, Abby's not feeling well," and he's like, "Oh, well, that sucks." It's kind of like the way that he sort of, that's what comes across when he says
Yeah.
that. I don't really need to go into the plot. I personally am not a huge fan of going plot, like, looking into plot points. I like to talk about thematics and stuff.
Sure.
Something that's very interesting about Abby to me is what it talks about, and how it brings us the characters that's completely different from what The Exorcist does. The Exorcist is essentially a very, very privileged white family
Yeah.
that has these
Mhm.
problems that happen to them. And in some ways, there's a little bit of like a colonialist, imperialist kind of thread running through that, because after all, the demon is perceived to come from the Middle East in The Exorcist, and a lot of this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And what Abby does is, here is a family that is, they're middle class.
Hold on one second. Let me see.
Yeah, go ahead.
Briggy, can you hear us? I don't know if she can hear us yet. I
I don't know.
see. I saw her connecting to audio, but
Oh, okay.
All right, go
No,
ahead.
you're fine. You're fine. And if you need that again, don't worry. I don't mind being
Okay.
being interrupted. But they're a middle class family, and at least as far as when the movie starts, it's kind of fairy tale esque, or almost Norman Rockwell esque, because the family doesn't really have a lot of problems. They're God fearing, they have a house, they all have jobs and careers, and even Abby is not a very passive character, just in terms of what she does in the community and for the church, and these types of things. So it definitely, at least starting out, is not a movie that leans into any kind of stereotypes. It's progressive in that way, I found, and I think in some ways that makes Abby more relatable. I think one of the reasons that it was a hit when it was in theaters for a brief period of time was just because people could connect to that. And like I said, it's a crowd pleaser. It delivers a lot of that kind of stuff. And as Abby gets demonically possessed under very similar circumstances to Regan McNeil in The Exorcist, there's a whole air of kind of sexual awakening and sexual repression, that happens throughout this movie. It's as if the male characters in this movie get uncomfortable with her becoming very sexually free, and
the husband seems
Yeah.
A little, I don't know. I mean, he just doesn't seem like he has a lot of masculinity in him.
Well, yeah,
I mean, he seems very like,
yeah.
oh no,
Yeah.
she's getting
Well,
sexual.
I think in some ways, William Marshall's character and the husband, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who plays him off the top of my head. There are some stereotypes in terms of they're like,
Hey, Briggy.
they're pastors, and they're very into family, and and this type of thing, and women's roles, and when Abby's kind of breaking these roles, it disturbs them.
It does.
Now, of course,
hold on 1 second.
oh
Tim.
yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Briggy, can you hear us? Okay.
Hi.
How are you? I can't hear you too well, though.
No, I think you're muted, darling.
Yep. Yeah, Briggy's muted.
Okay.
In a minute. I'll be back. No, we still can't hear you.
It should
Yeah,
be a
it's
mute
muted like on Zoom.
on the lower left.
Okay, how about
There we
There
go.
you go.
Yep.
There
You're
you go.
good. You're good. You're great. Yeah.
You sound just like
Hi,
yourself.
It's nice to see you.
Hi, good to see you as well.
Good to see
Ricky,
you
this
on-
is Tim Tolbert, our executive producer. He's
Hello,
Hello.
Tim. How
he's
are
holding
you?
forth on a film called Abby. Have you ever seen Abby? Carol
No.
Speed.
No.
It's good. It's good.
Well, you're in
Watch
for a
it
treat.
after watch it after I talk about it. Now
Okay.
it's basically blaxploitation Exorcist, but it's wonderful. It's such a great movie.
Oh, was it in the thread? Did you put it in the thread? Because I think I did click on it.
Yeah, and it's also the whole movie's on YouTube, so you can also watch it there too.
Oh, it is on
Yeah.
YouTube? I was just
Yeah.
going to ask
Yeah, and
you where
I
it's
have
available.
the DVD.
Yep.
Well,
it's
yeah,
good
but we're
stuff.
not going to your house.
Okay.
Oh, come on!
Yeah,
I
we're
got a
not
new
mentioning
house.
your
Everybody,
house,
come on
Henry.
over.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
congratulations. That's
I'll
right.
buy the
Thank you.
airfare. Yeah.
Very good.
We are going to
Yeah.
all do a convention together one day.
One of
That would
these
be
days.
fabulous.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Where are you? Where do you come from, Briggy? Right now, where are you broadcasting?
Right now,
from?
I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm sorry. I'm still trying to. I'm like rushing from work. I'm trying to get
What
stuff
part
set
of
up. but-
Pennsylvania?
Hey, y'all are neighbors.
I'm
Yeah.
in Stroudsburg.
Okay,
Do
I'm
you know
in
where that
Pittsburgh.
is?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
in
you're in
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
So, yep.
Okay.
Two of those
Mhm,
birds.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
not,
Pennsylvania
I mean,
has so many burgs. It's
It's like 3
ridiculous.
hours from me, maybe
You
2.5
really do.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm there a lot because I'm there looking. I'm going to the barns. I'm going to different museums and stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah. So
and then I
that's
go
where
to
I'm.
the
That's where I'm
Reading
broadcasting.
Terminal Market is there as well. So,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah, they have great food
That's
there.
cool.
So.
That's
Good.
cool. I'm glad more than me is just repping Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tim's the guy I was telling you about last time who we did the actually everyone here with us, sans yourself, of course, did the Dawn of the Dead thing.
Oh,
Because
okay.
Tim's the guy who lives in Romero country, so
Oh, you're in.
Yeah, so I got to see it at the Monroeville Mall, so that was
Oh,
pretty
wow.
exciting. So yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, it was fun.
and our second episode of that two-parter has just broke 300 views.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, you're welcome, Henry.
Thank you, Tim.
Very good.
So continue with the story of young Abigail Williams.
Sure, yeah. Like I said, I think there's a lot of gender roles and gender politics at play in this movie. I think that people that aren't into cult cinema or don't really understand some of these sides of genre cinema, they kind of would look at it and kind of think the movie is silly and and don't find any themes and things in it. But I think that they're very strong, and they definitely connected with me. And there are some kind of funny moments in the movie. I think some of them are unintentional. Some of them I actually think are intentional. Like when Abby is possessed, unlike Reagan McNeil, she goes all over town and she's just, taking no prisoners, and her dialogue's hilarious, but because she's not quite like swearing, like she's saying like crap, and they're like, "Oh my God, she just said crap! How horrible!"
Well, she does say some rather blatant sexual terms.
Yes, but some of like when she swears and she does like her monster voice, she'll be like, "You know what? You could all go to heck," and they're like, "Oh my God, how horrible!" That
she gets more into like Rudy Ray Moore territory as the movie goes on, and that's what you're waiting for after seeing The Exorcist.
Yeah,
like,
and
level?
that's really entertaining to watch, because then it kind of turns into a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde movie a little bit. Because she walks around like Mr. Hyde, and she goes to the club and she's hitting on men. I mean, she's having a good time.
Get your hands off me, motherfucker!
Yeah, in fact, in my opinion, I felt they should have just left the demon there, because she seemed to be having a good old time.
She did.
She was walking around town, and William Marshall had to.
But that's a commentary, isn't it? Though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the whole thing, it's just fun. It's just a lot of fun to watch. I don't see how anybody could watch Abby and not come away from that, not smiling. I mean, it's that, in my opinion, it's that entertaining.
I didn't make it through unscathed, I admit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and like I think that the first half of the movie is scarier than the second half. I think the second half does kind of get into that Rudy Ray Moore, kind of silly but still fun to watch. But the first bit of it, like when she's getting possessed and they're starting to see her act differently for the first time, she attacks somebody at her church and all this stuff, I think those kind of moments are scary. once she kind of goes out on the town and she's at the clubs and things, it sort of gets into more entertaining territory, I would say. And
I'd say she goes full Carol Speed then.
oh yeah, and she's phenomenal in the movie. She gets such
Carol Speed is one of those actresses that, I mean, and she really thought this way based on my weird correspondence with her. It went on for a couple of years on MySpace. Is that she's just she's very authentic. She was very wide open. She'd just say whatever the hell she felt like saying, and she tended to favor characters like that. And I would ask her just jokingly or trying to bond with her, like, so what about I can't think of the name of the character. I should that she plays in the Mac, but she's so good in that movie. And there's a really beautiful scene where they play the song "I Choose You" by Willie Hutch. He does the soundtrack, and you know, and she's just like starting to lay it out to him, like what it's been like on the street since he's been in prison. And she's like, I would like to find someone who would take care of me, you know. And he's like, I always saw you as like a nurse or a doctor or something. It's like, that would be righteously together, my man. But you know how it is in the streets. It ain't like that, man. It's tough out here. And you know, when a according to the Iceberg Slim's, you know, pimp, whatever methodology, that when a woman in that day chose their pimp, you know, and the guy who could protect them the most and would treat them the least bad, if not the best. And so they throw the song "I Choose You" while she's talking to Goldie, and you realize that they grew up together, first of all, and he'd be like, I had these fantasies about you, you know, and then they make love for the first time and it's all romantic. But when he becomes the pimp and he has to turn her out, he turns on her cold, and it breaks her character's heart, and you can kind of feel it. And I asked her a couple questions about that character, and she's like, she knew the street, man. She knew what the deal was. You know, like 30 years later, she's just going into this psychology of this character.
Oh yeah.
And I love that about cult actors, because they're so thankful for the few things that, you know, blew up for them.
Oh yeah, and often cult actors are kind of the most authentic, I think, in a lot of ways, because they know how to channel their real life and kind of, you know, find that line between acting and, you know, and acting like themselves or pulling from, you know, personal experience, which is harder than it looks. I think a lot of people would be surprised by that.
I think Bill has talked about that before, how hard it is for some people to play themselves on camera.
Absolutely. Or even not just themselves, but, you know, think about how many amateur actors, at least when they start those movies in cult films they often give some of the best performances. And, you know, being in a movie is tough. So you got to give them, you know, all credit where credit's due. But I'm going to be wrapping up Abby here in a minute. But so the thing I wanted to get into just real fast, in case people were wondering why we talked about earlier the print and kind of the lack of availability, it did get sued at one point in time by Warner Brothers, who claimed that it was copyright infringing upon The Exorcist. Now, by this point, Abby had already made $4 million in U.S. box office, so it was a pretty big hit. And Warner Brothers just kind of kept their, you know, hands on it, really. It never got re-released. Even though it got put out on DVD, it never really got remastered. It certainly doesn't look like it's ever going to be on any kind of Blu-ray or anything of that nature. I'm not 100% sure if Warner Brothers is keeping that from happening or what exactly the story is behind that, but they definitely, you know, they pulled it from theaters, which is a shame, because I think that if it ran for longer, I think it would have been a more well-known, you know, it could have been like
it was very infamous when I got into it took me a while to track it down. Nobody had it for rent, and I finally did see it on I borrowed it from a friend named the Marksman. He had like this library of duped horror movies. Like he had this list that he compiled from like Phil Hardy and all these books in alphabetical order of every horror film ever made or extreme film ever made, and he's eventually going to own them all. And he would put like 3 of them per tape on EP, so they didn't look that great. But you know, if you needed to see a movie, you would call the Marksman. Hey Marksman, I've never seen Abby. I've never seen Cannibal Holocaust. Here you go, bro. He was my gateway drug to a lot of shit.
That's
read
awesome.
about, but not seen.
Wasn't Abby referenced in I think it was "I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker."
Yeah, I think
There was
so.
there's a scene where like if I recall correctly, there's a woman, one of the main actresses, and some hoods kind of come up on her, and she turns around and she is in full
Yeah,
Abby.
yeah,
You know,
Yeah,
yeah. That is
yeah,
an Abbey rip. But see, I didn't know that. I didn't get that when I saw it because I saw it before Abby.
right?
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, but it definitely, and I mean, there are callbacks to The Exorcist. There's some lines that are flat out lifted from that. There's a whole scene where they, examine her in the hospital that's lifted from The Exorcist. There's little flashes of the demon, like Pazuzu in that movie, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it just, it's entertaining. I'd say it's certainly more entertaining than the rest of the Exorcist movies that came, after the first one.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Three is pretty damn
And
incredible.
three is good. Three is good, but I think
I
just
don't
as
know. I think
far
three
as
is brilliant. That's just me
telling,
though.
I think just as far as telling a story and having like an authenticity and things, I think that Abby, to me, it's kind of an unofficial sequel in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
It's sort of,
yeah,
it fits in like some of those unofficial Night of the Living Dead sequels, like Flesh Eater and Return of the Living Dead and things like that.
yeah.
It kind of has the same. It's in the same,
Isn't that weird
tapestry.
though?
It's just,
Because like
yeah,
Return of the Living Dead is a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. It's a parallel
yeah,
sequel.
yeah,
Because there's Rousseau's strand and there's
yeah.
Romero's strand, and they went in two
Mhm.
different directions.
Yeah, even though Russo didn't really have anything to do with the final version of Return of the Living Dead, but he
No,
did
his
do.
novel, not just
Yeah.
his novel, but Dan O'Bannon's a better writer. Let's be frank.
Well, yeah,
So,
but yeah. So it's just, but like I said, Abby is definitely one of those things that anybody watching this needs to track that down and watch it because it's
let me
absolutely
ask you
worth your
one more
time.
cult film question, real quick, while we're on the subject.
Okay.
And Bill may or may not have any thoughts or be curious about this. How would you stack this up against the glut of Italian Exorcist ripoffs? Because I mean, Italians ripped off everything, so that was
Sure.
inevitable.
I
So,
haven't seen any of the blatant Italian Exorcist ripoffs. I've seen stuff like oh god, I just watched it. The one that Linda Blair is in, that's from like the '80s, Witch House or something. I think isn't that an Italian? Is that an
I don't know
Italian
if it's Italian or not.
Don't
Exorcist? Okay,
think
well that's
so,
sort
but
of
I
an
may be wrong.
but
Oh
I
yeah,
haven't seen.
I know what you're talking about, the Lindsay film.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not one of
I
his best or worst.
I've
You're thinking
I've
of Beyond
seen
the Door, Henry.
yeah, I've
Like
seen stuff like that. I haven't seen as
Beyond the
many of
Door
the
is the main
I
one.
haven't seen as many of the Italian Exorcist movies, to be honest with you, but as far as stuff that I have seen that's Italian, that's in kind of the same vein, I mean, there actually is a lot of idiosyncratic stuff in this movie that I think fits really nicely with Italian horror movies. It's not quite as
Oh yeah.
brazen. There's not really a lot of gore or anything. In fact, there's barely any gore in the movie at all. But and there's not a lot of like violence either. There's some death and there's some like they kind of fight with Abby a couple times, but there's not a lot. There's not a high body count. There's not nothing like that.
It's more
But
the
I think it's just
blasphemy. It's just the
yeah,
blasphemy
yeah,
of it.
absolutely. And
So
there were also parts that just the scenes in the church and some of the dynamics of the churchgoers and church communities reminded me a lot of the movie Alice, Sweet Alice. Actually, to be honest with you, where
very
that's
Catholic
very
movie.
critical. Yeah, yeah, where that movie's very critical of kind of the Catholic community in America, and this is it kind of has the thing, it has the same things to say, I feel, in a lot of ways. And then the irony of the whole entire movie is after all this, and Abby does kind of get freed with being demonically possessed. They take the demon out. She's back to being, the mousy housewife at the end of the movie. She gets to go on vacation, and you're kind of like, oh, that's a little bit of a bummer, but so it's sort of a happy ending depending on which way you look at it. But yeah,
I mean, it's definitely a kind of a gimmick, but I think it's a
mm-hmm,
great one. I mean,
mm-hmm.
Going from playing essentially playing Dracula to then
Yeah,
essentially playing Max von Sydow, Father Merrin.
yeah,
Marshall, he put his spin on things. That was
oh yeah,
brilliant
oh yeah,
casting of him as
yeah.
the Exorcist.
Like I said, he was brilliant in everything,
Yeah,
and his performance as Blackula, truly, in my opinion, is one of the greatest horror performances
It's
of all
terrific.
time. That's just how good he is.
I
Yeah.
will say that's become a channel favorite because
Mhm.
Blackula
Oh
comes
yeah.
up in our conversations quite a
Yeah.
lot.
That's a great movie.
I mean, it should be. And the thing, I don't like the sequel as much as the original, but I think the original is just unbeatable in my opinion.
I like the sequel, but no, it's not as good as the original.
Yeah, well, Pam Grier's in it,
but
so
it's nice to see what he's up to. I like the character.
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes.
What's Blackula been up to?
You know,
I don't know.
There is one other Italian exorcist movie, House of Exorcism, which is the bastardized version of Mario Bava's masterpiece Lisa and the Devil, where they took it and they said, this is not going to put any asses in seats, so let's stick some let's take one of the actresses and have her the whole movie, the whole good Mario Bava stuff is a dream, a flashback, whatever the hell. Let's just put her in bed and she'll spit up frogs or whatever.
Which I find amazing that Alfred Leone, I don't really think he's done right by the stuff he owns of Bava's personally. Like I prefer Rabid Dogs to Kidnapped, much prefer. I think Kidnapped should not have existed. Rabid Dogs now is on Tubi, the real version that came out.
Oh, nice. Oh, thank you for telling me that.
Yes, finally. And or Plex, or maybe both, one or both. And
somewhere.
What he did to Lisa and the Devil, which I watched on Plex recently. I don't own a copy anymore, and I hadn't seen it in a few years. For a long time, it was my favorite Bava, and it's really the first Bava, my first Bava that I read about and studied up on that wasn't as widely known as I'd already seen Black Sabbath and Black Sunday, and I'd heard of Diabolic, but I didn't really know his catalog. And so my first thing was the Phil Hardy book. And, if that's the first thing you read is Kim Newman or whoever writing that, you're like, oh my God, this movie's the Holy Grail, And when I got a bootleg, I was like, it is the fucking Holy Grail. And when I saw it again a few weeks ago, I was like, this is one of his most artistic things he's ever
Still
done.
holds up. In fairness to Leone, I don't think it would have been successful released as it was.
I don't either, but I wish he didn't still have control over the stuff. That's the thing. But that's the risk when you get a producer who buys everything.
The sad part to me is that Bava died not realizing that it would ever be seen. Which has got to hurt.
Same with Rabid Dogs. Yeah, I mean, at least now you can get all his stuff.
Right.
You don't have to look as hard to find all of it.
Well, I think that now there's a little bit of like a renaissance of people who are interested in giallo movies, especially people like me and Kaylin's age. I think that now those movies are becoming a little bit more regularly available because they watch an Argento and then they go, oh, who's this Bava guy? And they watch Bava, or vice versa, or whatever. Lucio Fulci, whoever it is,
the big three.
And that's why, like, all of a sudden, Tubi has a massive Italian horror section. They have a giallo section, like tons of stuff, and because they're just gaining in popularity.
They've got 15 Thai movies. 15 Thai movies. I'm going to go ahead and just make an announcement before I turn it to our next person. Unless you have some more stuff you wanted to say.
No, I'm good with that right now.
Well, I had two announcements. One is please like and subscribe to the channel. We really desperately need help. We're 450, and if you're under 500, you don't exist on YouTube. And I just found out that a lot of conventions that we were talking about going to a convention earlier, the Heroes Con, which is one of the biggest in America that started here in Charlotte, you can't be a podcaster or be on a panel unless you have at least 1,000 subscribers. And when I read that, I was like, I wasn't surprised because Shelton's kind of, for all the great things Shelton has done for the comic industry, he really has. He's also kind of a killjoy. I mean, he's probably going to make people still wear masks this year. So he's of that mindset. So when I read that, I was like, okay, man, keep it elite, whatever. But it's more inspiration to keep going forward and keep growing. So please help us if you can. And the other thing I want to announce is that speaking of Bruno Mattei, we just about have a done deal for one of his muses to have an exclusive interview with us on the channel. And nobody's going to expect who it's going to be, even people who know about her. But she's incredible, and she's very eager to do it. So we just got to get scheduling.
If possible, I would
Excellent.
like to do a show where we contact Bruno Mattei from beyond the grave. And
I'm sure she would
We
be
can
down with that.
absolutely do a
Yes,
seance. I'm here for it.
if we can do that,
Wow.
yeah. Pick one director you want to talk to in a seance, and we each will get to interview that.
Well,
I am
director.
here for that. That sounds like a lot of fun. I have lots of really good spooky ritual candles. We can do
Good,
this.
good.
We can totally do this.
Ambiance.